morning, everyone. It's 10:30, so we shall now start the Place Overview Committee meeting. Welcome to the meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting using the link on the agenda. Item 2. We have apologies from absence. Councillor Steve Davenport, who is being substituted by Councillor Roy Allcroft. Thank you, Roy. And Councillor Richard Marshall, who is the portfolio holder for Highways and Regulatory Services, isn't available today, so he sends his apologies as well. Item 2. Members are reminded that they must declare their disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests in any matter being considered at the meeting as set out in Appendix B of the Members' Code of Conduct, and consider if they should leave the room prior to the item being discussed. Does anyone have any? No? Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 3 then. Minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody want to pick anything up on those meeting minutes? No? That says a lot for the minute taker. Well done. Thank you very much. We're getting through this meeting very quickly. Item 4, public question time. We have none. Item 5, member question time. We have none. And we're now moving on to item 6, new housing development task and finish group. Daniel Webb, the overview and scrutiny officer, is going to present the report, but I'd first like to thank everyone who took part in it. It was really interesting, and I think we've come up with some very good recommendations. Yes, Roger.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. I note the report, but I've only been notified of one meeting. From the look of it, the task and finish group met several times, but I think for whatever. Sorry, Chairman. Note the report. Yep, it contains good, and we're going to discuss it. But I note there's references on about only one meeting. Task and finish groups are circulated to all members when they meet, but I can't remember seeing any dates of any meetings. So oversight, but task and finish groups, and I think there would be a number of members who would be interested in seeing the agenda and maybe coming in to listen or whatever. So I congratulate the work, but as I say,
I understand what you're saying, Roger. There were actually, if you could call it, 2 meetings. One of your members was on that meeting as well. The first one was a site visit, which 2 particular members turned up for, which was great. And I thank the officers involved in that as well. Tabitha, very helpful. The second meeting was basically all day. We started in the morning, went through until the afternoon. So that's why it's one meeting. It was a long meeting, and anyone who wanted to sit in was very welcome to come and sit in. Yes, Roger.
if they knew it was taking place.
Right, Daniel. Would you like to take it away?
Thank you very much, Chair. This review came about from a question from an elected member from Radbrook, who was concerned about some of the snagging issues on a new build in her division. I think the members of this group, all of them, when we discussed this question, seemed to have a story from their own patch, and it was very much the decision of this group that it wanted to look at this within a task and finish group. So obviously the work that we carried out is contained in the report, and it makes a number of recommendations, particularly around building control. And I think the key learning from the elected members who I spoke to during the course of it, that appreciation of planning and building control being totally different processes. They quickly realise that if they don't fully appreciate the then perhaps the public are going to either, and this may be the cause of many of the problems members receive from aggrieved homeowners complaining about the quality of the new build of their homes. So the reports there in front of you, the recommendations are as suggested. If you agree to those recommendations, the chair will take those to cabinet and add those to the other recommendations that this committee has made that cabinet are due a response to the committee on.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Does anybody want to say anything? Julian?
Is that working? We don't get to speak about it. Assuming that's working.
Yeah, they've had a mess. Yeah, there's a few problems with the mics at the moment,
Oh.
but I've just had a message from IT. Is it working now? Just get Lorna to pop in, I think, again.
I think we can hear you though, Julian.
Okay, I've got a red light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all the work on the report, Daniel. I think it's great. It's very detailed. I'm especially appreciative of the fact that there's some follow-up work in there even after the meeting we did. So I think the section on new homes quality board and the ombudsman is really interesting and really helpful. And because of that, I'd quite like us, I know it's a bit late, but to just slightly tweak one of the recommendations. The second recommendation is to request its building control and communication service collaborate to develop a plan to increase awareness of building control. But I think we should probably include in there and the development of the new homes quality board and of the ombudsman. It seems to me that those are things that householders need to be made aware of. But otherwise, I'm really happy with the report and thank officers for the work.
I would agree with that. Is everybody happy to include that in the recommendation? Does anybody else want to say anything about this? Yes, Shropshire?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm unclear on page 9, where it says the group looked in detail at 2 cases, noted that both developments had been overseen by an approved inspector, rather than look, and planning enforcement were not possible for them to take any action. I thought planning enforcement can take any action they wanted within 4 years of anything taking place. If the planning things had not been taken into consideration and taken place. Is this because the 4 year was over or not? Because any development is needs to be carried out in compliance with the rules and what is said there as the conditions. So I'm a little bit puzzled by that paragraph.
Thank you. I think I know the answer, but I'll let the experts answer that. Tracy Down, would you like to come in?
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I think the councillor has completely muddled up 2 processes, and this is why this report is important. Building control is completely separate from planning control. So Roger has just absolutely strayed right across those areas. So planning enforcement deals with planning issues and enforces planning conditions. This is a completely separate area of work. So it is not planning, it is building control. And building control has its own legislation and has it and customers can go to the council for their building control service, or they can go to approved inspectors. If customers go to approved inspectors, then the council cannot enforce that work unless it is so catastrophic, you know, so the work is so catastrophic and we know that sort of scale of stuff, then we can step in and intervene. But normally we cannot interfere with approved inspectors' works. So there are bodies, there are insurances around approved inspectors' works that the customer has to use. It is not for the council. And moreover, when customers come to the council and councillors, we cannot help councillors and we cannot intervene in that work. So there's absolutely very, very clear lines around that.
Okay, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you for that. But in particular, Chairman, I was looking at landscaping and drainage, which I thought were planning and therefore would be subject if it was not in compliance with the conditions that were initially put down.
I'll let you respond, Tracy.
So it's exactly the same answer again. development, housing estates need planning permission, and they need building regulations approval. And some works are within building control, and some are with planning. So layout of the estate, the aesthetics, all the things we know that planning deal with, the buildings, how pretty they look, are in the area of planning. Building control deal with issues around, is it built safely? Is it going to stay up? Is the drainage in place correctly? Can it function properly? And they're the areas building control deals with. And that's why you will find that landscaping, drainage matters will be in building control, and they will also be in planning, but they have different responsibilities. So planning does not deal with the safety of drainage and the buildings, whether they're going to stay up. Building control deals with that. Planning deals with the issues around the usual material considerations, aesthetics, where it's built, whether it's in Greenbelt or not, all those things, Roger. So they're two completely different processes. And I think that plays into the recommendation around communications. There is so many, people unclear around where things lie and causes confusion. And what was really interesting at the task and finish group was actually that dawning realization that some of those members did not even understand that the approved inspectors existed and could do work as well as the council. And actually one of the recommendations we've got is around council work always coming to our building control service. I mean, we can encourage it, we can't mandate it, but it's something that to us is quite important, not only to sustain our building control services in the council so that they exist, but actually as the council we have councillors that we're responsible to as well, and and that's quite important for our residents so that they've got somewhere to go. Improved inspectors, I'm afraid, some do come and go. We've seen a number of them go, and people are just sort of left then thereafter, whereas the council will hopefully always be here. So I think there's a bit of a support thing for residents around. If you use building control services in the council, we will be here, we will do it very well, we will do it to death at sometimes, and your members are here as well. So if you have issues, you can come to them and they can work with officers to resolve them. So I think there's a lot of comms we could do better around that so people understand what the process is. Sorry, Chair. Probably.
Oh, no, it's fine. I think what you said is really important. I think one of the issues is that we understand quite how it works, and actually my message would be, particularly if you're using a small builder, or it might not go down very well with some, that you should use the council inspectors, because you have some comeback if you do that, because it tends to be the smaller builders.
Yes. Yeah.
There's some very good small builders out there though. Now. So to protect yourself, it's a good idea to use the council. Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd echo Roger's thoughts about it being a good report. I thought very interesting reading. One of the recommendations that the Shropshire Council proceeds to recruit a dedicated planning officer, if there's a word in there wrongly, with a specific remit of ensuring high quality, coherent, biodiverse open space and new developments. Now, elsewhere in the report, it's mentioned that some of these issues, such as desire line paths, public-private space not being delineated very well, haven't been picked up by planning officers in considering the report and considering the submission of the application, and they got missed because of pressure on resources, pressure on staff. So this would be a very positive move. Are we going to recommend this to Cabinet, to go into the budget for, is it going to be that stronger recommendation that we can take that through?
Yes, it is. We have a cabinet member, so if you take that on board, Ian, when you go to cabinet and it's discussed and pre-meetings, yes, it is. I think it's very, very important to do the service properly. Absolutely.
Because things have been missed, haven't they? Obviously, in the past. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Jeff.
Thank you. Can I just say that I learned a hell of a lot. I've been on the council for 28 years doing planning at town council level, and I really didn't appreciate the fact that building inspectors, once they have approval, can build something different to the original plans. And if I didn't understand that, and a lot of the members don't understand that, the public aren't.
No.
So I really would like that point that Tracy's just raised to go and be publicised on the application, that if people use private building inspectors, is at their risk. not our risk. They can't. There's no comeback to us, and I just think it would be important to make people aware right from the very beginning where they stand. And I'm amazed that somebody we bang the gavel. We go through plans of you must have this drainage and that drainage. As soon as it's passed, the building inspector can then change it, as long as it complies to the building regulations. He can change it, and that's just amazing. We've got no control over that, and I just think that people should be made aware and safeguard themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. David.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair. Like many others, I think this report is a very good one. I certainly found attendance at the task group very, very interesting, very informative, and I learned a great deal. And I think there's a good set of recommendations. And particularly important, I think the recommendation about increasing awareness of building controls to would-be homeowners. But there are two things. One is I think that I back very much Councillor Mosley said about this going to Cabinet and being, going through recommendations and agreeing with some of those. And secondly, I think it'd be useful to have a review maybe in 12 months' time when we look at these things, because the recommendations here, whether they be implemented or not, because I know that for people living on these new housing estates, these issues are fundamental, very, very important. And I think that we should review it again in 12 months' time.
And I'll be happy to include those in the recommendations, please, Sandra. I'm sure other members will as well. I think what we're all feeling, it's very painful if you're going through this and you've got issues on a building site, whether it be the highways, the roads, the open space. And people need to know how they deal with this. And I think as a council, we need to put that information out there. And that will happen, hopefully, after these recommendations. I'm just going to read through the recommendations and then I'll take a vote if everyone's happy with them, including the bits that Roger and David have put in. Oh, was it Julian? Yeah, Julian. Sorry, Julian. The group recommends that Shropshire Council should always use its own building control service for its own developments or those of its ALMO. The group recommends that Shropshire Council's building control and communication services collaborate to develop a plan to increase awareness of building control to would-be homeowners in Shropshire. The group therefore recommends that building control be included in the programme of induction provided to elected members following all council elections in 2025. I think that was your recommendation, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it was.
Which is a good idea. I think that's right. And the group recommends that Shropshire Council support Canovi and Star Housing proposals to create their own open space management company. Is everybody happy with those, with the additions? Yes, Julie?
Yeah, just to clarify that addition.
Yeah.
So it was, I think it was under the second one to
Yeah.
also reference the
I've got
particular
that
new
down.
one.
Yes, Dan was very
Thank you.
efficient. Thank you.
Chair, could I just suggest two minor tweaks to the recommendation? The first one to say that it encourages the council to use the building control service, because we can't mandate it. We'd love to, but we can't legally. So it's about encouraging. So the first port of call should be using our service if we can, because we obviously have to tender for work, just like approved inspectors do. And then the other recommendation around having an officer to do open space, it doesn't have to be a planning officer, it's to be an officer that can help us design, it's sort of someone that has landscape skills, so design good open spaces. And that officer may sort of sit across some services within under Mark's directorate. So this is more around open spaces, and it's a resource that was lost many years ago, and it's trying, I think we saw some examples of poor open space where there's lack of good design, and it's really to bring that back in. And it might not be a funding issue solely, so we're looking at creative ways of trying to bring a post in, but it's more around support for that post. And then Chair, just to finally say, we're absolutely, in terms of building control, absolutely heartened to have members' interest in it. So building control is a service in most councils that councillors are not interested in at all. It sort of carries on its own world, has tight regulations. And, I think Andy Jones, who heads the service, was absolutely bowled over with the interest in his area of work, and the recommendations absolutely supports and do what he can to to assist on those. But it's really, really great to have members' interest in this area, which to us is really important because it's about safe building. So I'd like to thank the Task and Finish group for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it was really good to have Andy there at the meeting. We've got Tabitha Live here, Planning and Development Services Manager, who is new. I'm just saying that for some of the members who don't know her. You came on the site visits with us and sat in the meeting. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I don't think there's anything to add. I think Trace has covered most of the points, but it's, you know, I had spoken about reviewing conditions and other things which we are going to be looking at because of some of the problems seen on the site visit. So
yeah,
conditions in section 106 will be scrutinising much more as we move forward to try and avoid some of the points that were spotted on site.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we take a vote on this now? I assume everybody's said what they want to say. And Daniel will go away from this meeting because we discussed it at the beginning, and we're going to try and get it into cabinet as soon as possible. And hopefully we can agree for
1st of March I'm aiming for.
first. Oh, you won't be here. Oh, okay. 1st of March. So that would be great. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work you did on that, because it was an excellent report and not one person had an issue with any of this.
Oh, thank you.
So well done, Daniel. Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. Everybody happy with this? Yeah, okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. We now move to item 7, with a report being presented by Andy Wild, Head of Highways, and it's Highways Capital Programme. Nice to see you again, Andy.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, I'll give so yeah, good morning. I just want to present the report really and just give a quick overview and summary. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm not sure whether my mic's behaving at all, but
I can hear you. Can everyone hear?
Yep.
Yeah.
Roger, can you hear Dan there? Okay.
Okay, I can carry on. So I'd just like to introduce the report and give everyone a quick overview. So in terms of highways capital investment, we are sort of still transitioning out of a period of underinvestment in the highways assets. So a number of issues are still kind of being addressed, certainly in terms of backlog of carriageway defects, which have seen a significant reduction over the last 12 to 18 months as the new investment strategy for highway maintenance has rolled out. That cycle is starting to improve, and that evidence is now there in terms of NHT surveys and other performance indicators that we use. That suggests that performance is starting to see a significant step change. I think the investment, certainly as we've transitioned out of this period, has been heavily sort of weighted towards risk, which is highlighted in the early parts of the report in terms of mitigating insurance claims. Bringing down the risk to the travelling public. Of course, our main priority is in terms of the Highways Act is to ensure that the highway is safe and serviceable. However, you know, as part of the work that we've also been doing, we've been reviewing the way that the investment strategy has been operating and have now seen various initiatives start to improve and change the way that the highways asset is being maintained. We've started to embrace self-delivery and mixed economy, which is starting to see find and fix teams and various other people out on the network, which is doing preventative maintenance as opposed to reacting to problems. So, for example, in terms of cycling infrastructure and footways, these teams cut back vegetation, they clean signs, they do things to maintain what we have on a routine basis. We've also seen a strong investment in surface dressing, which is starting to see, a change in terms of protecting the asset that we have and getting out of this cycle of reacting and spending disproportionate amounts of our capital money on reactive potholes. So as that investment starts to increase, we should see a decrease in the amount of reactive maintenance that we are having to undertake. We also grab opportunities when we're delivering capital schemes to look at the wider asset. So in the report, we've also detailed areas where capital schemes have worked alongside cycling and footway infrastructure. and that we've proactively grabbed the opportunity to make improvements. A number of schemes are cited in that, as well as locations that I'm aware of. That Roman Road is a good example where we surface dressed from the Priory roundabout all the way down to Port Hill roundabout. At the same time as we did that surface dressing of the carriageway, we relined all of the cycle lane, cut back all of the vegetation and swept so that the cycle lane was brought up to standard at the same time as the carriageway. And that is something that is now built into our processes, where we try and seize the opportunity to undertake maintenance at the same time. There's key advantages to doing that. One being the revenue pressures are offset because we can really legitimately capitalise that work at the same time as we deliver the scheme. So the teams are well aware of these opportunities, and like I said, that is built into our processes. We've obviously seen a transition coming out of in-year funding, which has been very problematic for us as a service in terms of managing those in-year pressures. The long-term investment plan from the council now allows us to develop that 3 to 5 year forward plan. We can now plan and prepare, which involves identifying schemes through the prioritisation process. We can then design 1 year and then construct those schemes the following year. The advantage there is we have enough time to plan, prepare, communicate and engage with people and spot these opportunities to try and weave in more elements of work when we deliver a capital scheme. So we shut the road once and complete as much work as we can at that particular time. So we are starting to see that change occur, and again, the significant efficiency has been gained in highways by developing a different style of working and a different approach to maintenance. That is releasing money and is now going to allow us to again do more of this proactive work and plan ahead for 2-3 years to get the maximum investment we can out of the capital budget that we've got. So that covers all aspects. So it's footway, cycleway, carriageway, and all of the infrastructure that we've got. So that work will continue as we go forward over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Then just remind members what we've been asked to do in the recommendations. Identify areas of concern not already considered within the report for consideration as part of the ongoing improvement. Yeah, David.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andy, for this report. And I do appreciate the pressures that the Highways Department is under, but I do think this report, it lacks any proper attention to active travel. And I just want to pick up what you said recently about Roman Road, and particularly looking at, if you look at 6.36 within the report, what happened on Roman Road and to some extent on Abbey Foregate was that you resurfaced the road, but in actual fact you didn't make any improvements to the cycleway or the footpath really. What happened? You actually put down new white lines, and to be honest with you, that the side of the road wasn't actually side of the pavement wasn't actually cut back. The white lines were moved across. You can see that as you walk down there. So to create a little more space for pedestrians and that reduce your space for cyclists. And so what's happening is that you are not actually taking into proper account, I believe, the provisions of active travel. And we've got LTM 120. You know, the work that you've done on Abbey Foregate, the work you've done on Roman Road, in no way complies with the provisions of LTM 120. And also you mentioned in there about Monkmore Road. Monkmore Road's within my division, part of it's within Councillor Mosley's division. And as far as I'm aware, there are no proposals at the moment for major improvements to the cycle provision on that road, or the pedestrian provision, or the need for extra crossings. And really what I'm saying is I think this report has major, I think that's major context in terms of active travel. I mean, today, for example, not only does it not comply, I think, with the LTM 120, which is council policy, it's totally against the development of policy at a national level, where we're seeing more and more attention being paid to active travel. Only today, a press release has been issued by the Department of Transport outlined that it's £200 million to improve walking and cycling routes, boost local economies. Now, you know, we are not actually developing the ideas and schemes and which will enable us to effectively bid for that sort of money. We need a highways department and a capital programme which has got active transport at the centre of its operation. And looking at this report and various sections in this report, I do not think that's happening. You can look at it, you can see it in 6.36. I mentioned 6.35 as far as that. You know, 6.17, where you say you're working collaboratively with WSP to ensure that maintenance processes are fit for purpose. They're not fit for purpose. And I might also say, you say in 5.1, there are no direct climate change implications of this report. There are. You know, the standard of footways and cycleways is directly linked to climate change. It's about reducing the number of people using cars in short journeys and having that application of 50% of journeys in towns being walked or cycled by 2030. That's the government's aim. We should be, you know, in the not only following that, but in the forefront of developing those ideas. So I'm very disappointed by this report. I understand the pressures you're under. I understand that, you know, the concern, the problems with funding. But I think I would like to see you come back to this committee with a report which has active travel much more central and to this.
Thank you, David. Mark, can I bring Mark in first, please? Thank you. And I'll come to you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Taking on board all of the comments just made, just to be really clear, the scope of this report is about condition of highways, highway capital programme, highway maintenance implications. Just to reassure you, in March at Cabinet, there is both the LC WIP strategy document that's coming out for consultation, and also there's a bikeability and pedestrian training kind of programme that's coming out. So the points that were made about the importance of active travel will be contained within that aspect of kind of strategy work. So maybe that's something to pick up following sight of that document when you see it. But just to be really clear in terms of this is really about addressing those issues of the state of the highways, the investment in capital, and what that has meant in terms of, you know, condition expenditure on things like potholes and other repairs. I mean, that's broadly
I think
what you tried to.
that's it. And I think what the report is trying to illustrate, that we are not working in isolation. We have colleagues who have a different agenda for active travel and deliver those types of projects. What the report is trying to demonstrate, that by having more time to plan, we can incorporate elements into the maintenance programme where it's appropriate.
Thank you very much. I'd suggest after it goes to Cabinet in March that maybe we have a look and bring it back onto our work programme and have a look at it in more depth then, because I think you've gone deeper than this report, or wider rather than this report is meant to be. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's acceptable, Chair. But I do think we need a change of direction, a change of emphasis in all these reports.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, it'd be good to have us back here to discuss.
Okay. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. The title of the report is Carriageways, Footways and Cycleways Capital Programme. So Footways and Cycleways Capital Programme in the report, and should be focused on that. And again, I note the press release that came out, and it says as part of the press release, and this £200 million, which is available, the funding could see more young people choosing a healthier and greener way to travel from home to classroom, with less than half the children aged 5 to 16 walking or cycling to school. This investment aims to boost uptake. The government's objective is to enable 55% of all primary school children to walk to school by 2025. I note that's all children, so that's both urban and rural. So it would be good to see what Shropshire Council is doing as active travel throughout the whole of Shropshire, as well as Shrewsbury, Oswestry, Market Drayton and all the towns, but also the rural areas, because there are many schools in the rural areas where parents drive their children to school because they feel unsafe walking along those roads. And this money there could be useful, but it's something that we need a policy to actually come forward and bring it and put in place. Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman.
May I bring in Matt Johnson? I see you've got a different title for that on it. Are you effective?
I can revolve it. There's another one on the back.
Oh, is there? Strategic projects, just for anybody who's listening.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Chair. It was just picking up a couple of the points, and I think that this is the complexity of the highways team. So myself and Andy work hand in glove in terms of the highways asset. In Steve Smith's absence, I've picked up many of the responsibilities that sit more broadly. So we're talking about step change in terms of cycle provision. We're talking about national competitive rounds of bidding for investment in the highways network. If there was a cleaver to come down, there's maintaining the current asset, and has taken us into the new world of increased active travel opportunities and cycling, for example. So we mentioned a couple of tools we have to hand. The LC WIP, which is approaching maturity at this point in time. Not preempting my item, we've got the LTP4, which is a key documentation which globally looks at issues around decarbonisation, for example, but will start to be the hook with which we can snag this national funding. I think I'm right in saying that it's not available to Andy direct in terms of competitive bidding rounds. We've got a complete active travel team sitting within Victoria Merrill's area through Rose Dovey, who you're probably familiar with. We've got initiatives that tackle some of the challenges you've raised there, low traffic neighbourhoods, LC WIP, 20-mile-an-hour rollout. There's a number of consultative exercises planned in the next 6 months, which are going to address directly some of the concerns that you brought about. And it's just that clarity between maintaining the current asset and taking it into a new world. So I'm just trying to show that we've actually got a breadth of experience and a breadth of activity, which is much more wide than simple maintenance. It's probably also worth noting, I've been working with Daniel and other officers looking at the home for that piece of work. And it's been decided that although the LTP4 sits within place, within the community's scrutiny group, there is an active oversight of those initiatives coming forward over the next 12 months that Daniel's planned for their agenda. Might be useful to make some explicit links between those two committees as those come forward, because they're clearly cross-cutting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Matt. Julian.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. I just want to dig into that a little bit more, because I think so. And I'm sorry to members that I'm going to mention another part of Shrewsbury, but just so my experience as a cyclist is, yes, it's lovely that we no longer have a really rough surface out there, but it is interesting, and I'm just trying to understand how we get a line put back on, which is now, not deemed to be fit for purpose. That style of cycle lane is no longer deemed to be fit for purpose. So, but that line came back. Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? I'm not sure in terms of safety, because as I understand it, people are now saying actually those lines are more dangerous than not having anything at all. So I query, that decision. I'm just asking really how we come to that decision. Similarly with the Heathcote's roundabout, which I tackle on a regular basis to try and go shopping, and it used to have sort of green areas as you enter the roundabout, and I think drivers took notice of that. Now they don't. So actually getting around that roundabout on a bicycle has actually become more difficult since it's been resurfaced. Now it might be that it's more difficult but safer, which I appreciate until we do something more interesting with it. But I'm just trying to understand how that decision making is made at a time when perhaps we're not investing in the active travel in the way that we perhaps want to, but we are doing some work on those junctions. But are we leaving them in a state which is actually worse for existing cyclists?
Yeah, happy to come back on that. So just to answer your question, Julian, we as part of our sort of design process, what we will do when we have examples where cycle lane infrastructure and things need to be are affected by a maintenance scheme, we will consult with our traffic colleagues who will then advise on whether we need to put back like for like or whether we need to make some adjustments to that. So some of the things that you cited came off the back of those conversations. Heathgate's roundabout was one that I know was looked at in detail, and I think that the theory, again, traffic colleagues will know better than myself, but that green surfacing is there to place some element of doubt in people's mind about who has priority. And again, that does work, but it also creates this sort of environment where cyclists can be impacted. And I think when they looked at some of the safety records, there had been personal injury accidents off the back of some of that. So although it can create uncertainty in some people's minds, again, that has had impact when drivers haven't had that same thought and have carried on thinking I've got right of way. So, you know, this is a wider piece of work that colleagues need to be involved with in terms of ensuring that the cycling infrastructure, you know, is as good as it possibly can be. But from a maintenance perspective, what we will do is consult with those colleagues to see what is the best course of action when that maintenance work is carried out.
Thank you. I do wonder, we've had Highways Capital Programme reports before, and a number of times there have been information in there that you hadn't had that you think you wanted. I'm just wondering if it would be possible to produce a report 2 weeks before the meeting so that members could see that, and if there's anything missing, then perhaps they could ask.
I mean, I think
is that possible?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I think this is an area where I think the maintenance element is one thing. I think we're talking about a broader agenda here, which needs to be more carefully considered, because that will open it out to a wider team of colleagues.
Okay, perhaps it's something we can think about, and perhaps you and Mark and myself even could have a conversation about how we can bring the report that actually members of the committee would like to see. I mean, I haven't got a problem with it personally. I know it's a light touch.
I think I understand where sort of members want to go with this. I think this brings into a whole range of other considerations that Matt has highlighted that need to be thought about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Another part of the cycle lobby here today. So David and Julian have both spoken on that, and I have to say, you know, you look at this and you see cycling as a poor relation. It really is in here. A couple of questions. It says here that, you know, cycleways can be part of the carriageway or footway and not specifically identified in maintenance terms. Is there a reason why that data can't be disaggregated so we can actually see what is spent on cycleways? Because I cycled up to Meal yesterday from where I live, and the state of those paths are shocking. They really are. They're cracking up. The white lines have gone, and the debris on there, you know, if it's wet, it's dangerous. I'm sure our colleagues would say the same. Yeah, there's leaves on there to become compacted, become slippery. Can we not get a really good clean of the paths that we've got before we even start looking at getting anything better?
I would suggest, Pam, that it's the same all over the country.
Oh yes, I'm not saying it's any different. I'm just giving you my experience. I cycle in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, but it must be difficult. Maybe I'm thinking of this, prioritising what you do first, because everybody, I'm sure, in all their areas.
There's a number of factors here. Of course, I think in the past, when cycle infrastructure has been improved, when we've had pots of money from central government, what has never come with it is commuted sums to pick up some of the ongoing maintenance considerations. And at times when revenue budgets have been squeezed and pressurised, that has been an area where we've struggled to deliver what I'd describe as routine maintenance activities. I highlighted it earlier that, you know, we are transitioning away from underinvestment to a point where we are now investing more meaningfully. That is going to release money and allow us to hopefully embrace sort of more proactive maintenance, which we've started to do through find and fix teams and various other teams that are getting ahead of this. Because I agree with you. You know, I think to try and promote cycling on roads and cycleways that have got signs that need attention and vegetation that needs cutting back, relining that needs to be done. It's important. So we are actively trying to find ways of releasing some of that revenue through cost-effective measures to give us that money that we can bring back in proactive maintenance.
I think I'd also echo Councillor Vasmus' points about Muckmore Road. It's in 3 of our wards, 3 of our divisions. I don't think it is. I wasn't working on it. That we were told almost a year ago that the work was going to be done after gas mains work, but we've heard nothing since. I know the communication has got better, and perhaps it's just nothing to communicate. But I think Councillor Vasman's right. I know we can't do expensive retrofits, but we should be looking at what is there now and seeing if it can be better when it's redone. I mean, the point about the crossings, there's no crossing between those of you that know Shrewsbury, Cleveland Street and Clive Road. And there's a lot of children cross that road, going to primary and secondary schools. Before I was a councillor, I tried to get something done on the corner by Heritage Glass, near where I live. It was actually measured up and then it was abandoned. But it really is an unsafe road, that. And the Heritage Glass crossroad It's been identified as an accident cluster, I believe, hasn't it, Councillor Wiseman? But we really, I think, rather than just put down like for like, I think we really do need to look at Montmore Road. I know that's beyond the scope of the scrutiny, but if that message could go back to highways, that would be good.
Okay, thank you for that. I do think there are some positives in this report, which I think we also have to recognise, even though there are things here that we all can find. There are some good things, and it is getting better, and communication, I think, particularly, is a lot better. So thank you for that. Roy.
Yeah. I'll shout. Yeah, looking at Shropshire, and it borders various other counties, and we're looking at trying to increase tourism, and you can't move in Market Drayton on a Saturday and a Sunday for long distance bikers. How much liaison is going on between the different counties to develop cycle routes right through? And again, there's a lot of rural routes that could be made cycle friendly, but aren't being. The concentration tends to be on Shrewsbury, quite rightly. You've got a lot of roads, and the likes of Oswestry. It just seems we're missing something somewhere by all this concentration on large centres rather than looking at cycling for pleasure down through Cheshire into Shropshire and into Wales.
Question: do we talk to cycling lobbies, stakeholders, clubs? Do we involve? Oh, thank you, Matt.
Right, I'll shout as well. Yes, we do. The National Cycle Network, which is perhaps the most well-known long-distance cycle network, passes through a number of areas of Shropshire. We're in constant debate with them as regards the status of some of those routes, because there are implications for certain amendments we make on the local network that may or may not favour their highlighting of. I pick up Route 81, which has been in debate at the moment, as where some of its urban existence is in peril because of some of the measures we're putting in for local needs to cross roads and slow traffic down. There's a slight offset in their ambitions, but I think I'd probably dwell on the point which is well made by yourself, which is there's two functions in the cycle network. There's almost the last mile, which is that movements to school, movements to town, offsetting a short car journey. Clearly that we're prioritising those wherever we can. I think the longer distance network of the leisure cyclists that you describe, I've seen them on the A53 and the A49, and I mean, it wouldn't be my favourite route, but there's a point at which it's you can't control people's movement. So it's optimising our investment. And I think if we were to look for bangs for buck, which is a very blunt way of getting that, in terms of modal shift, getting people out of a car onto a bike, our investments best place at this point in time with those shorter journeys in urban areas. That doesn't mean that rural towns can't benefit from that. So we're going through the LC whip exercise at this point in time, which has highlighted numerous market towns outside of the county town. And there are direct interventions that are going to be proposed as part of that. I think March was the deadline for that to come through for members' consideration at the next stage. Really useful input from members can be garnered at that stage. So it's not ignored. And actually, it's something that we're focusing on. It's just the timeline perhaps doesn't segue exactly with the timing of this committee. So if we can take comments at the point at which that's in the members' domain, we can actually focus the LC whip on those rural towns' needs.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I think I'll draw this to a close now. I think it's been some really good discussion and there's a lot of things.
Chairman,
Yes, Roger.
can I just ask for clarification? I looked at the agenda.
Yes.
And the agenda paper says, ensure Shropshire Council has a staffing and infrastructure in place to plan and deliver programmes of work made possible by increased capital. Have we got the staffing and infrastructure in place? The report doesn't really signify that we have. Multiple questions, but we are a scrutiny committee. Do we need to make representations to say that we need more staff? We need it in there, and I see the reference about WSP, but where is Shropshire going over the next number of years? Reference was made by Councillor Vasmer to the press release for £200 million coming down the line. Have we got that infrastructure in place? Do we need to look at it? Thank you, Chairman.
Did in the report that money was Are they doing that in the Shropshire Star?
No,
That money's going to be used for
that's a
that?
perfectly fair question. And in the past, when we have received DFT money, we've had sort of big chunks of money put into the programme in year without any additional staff, which has made it very difficult for the teams that I'm responsible for to deliver on that work. So part of having a 4 to 5 year sort of forward plan means that we can build the team around what we need to deliver. So we've already brought in Mohammed Safraz to help oversee the programme. Laura Howard is now in place as engagement officer. So I'm comfortable with the resources that we've got at this moment in time, Roger.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Thank you very much.
sorry,
Yes,
if I just
yes,
add to
certainly,
that,
Matt.
on top of Andy's on top of Andy's resource, also I describe them as windfall opportunities where Shropshire Council's been successful around the LC whip, around the 20-mile-an-hour schools initiative and active travel. Within the wider highways team, we do retain against those capital allocations staffing resource to deliver them. So we've been very successful at getting some very highly qualified officers, some of whom are actually remote to the county, but actually spend their time visiting the county as and when required. So we do build the resource that can flex according to the money we've got in the bank. I think retaining a staff without the windfall of DFT funding is sometimes the wrong way round. So we actually react to the point of a funding bid landing, and we can build a team around delivering that discrete funding bid. And it's worked very well for us today.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. I can't resist it, I'm sorry. DFT funding, DFT are telling us what to do. Where do members come in? Because the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit outside schools, that was adopted by a council resolution 3-4 years ago, and we've got 6 pilots in place, and that's it. And that was considered as urgent. The resources hasn't been built around that, so it's DFT are telling us what we can and can't do. Where does members fit in, especially as regards, for example, the 20-mile-an-hour outside schools?
I can pick that one up if you want me to. Oh, sorry, Mark. No, I defer to Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Important.
Thank you for that, Roger. That's a broad topic, isn't it? In the world of kind of levelling up and devolution, there's a big kind of national bit, which is, place money locally and let us decide priorities, and let's not keep bidding for things, because bidding, takes capacity. I think the reassurance that you've got here, though, is that we're sighted on all these fronts, and if we can maximise what money we can get in, fine. The key bit is, I think, in our policies and our strategies, that our resources follow our priorities. That's the important bit, I think, to look for in things like the LC whip, the local transport plan, and other kind of key strategies. The test then from all members will be is, are we resourcing that? If these things are important, and we've got the resources to follow it. I think the important piece here for me is that what you've seen is that the capital investment is making a big difference in terms of the revenue, and I think that's something to look out for in terms of the future shape of the capital programme. Is what are we doing beyond what Andy's talking about, which is capital for, if you like, enhanced repair and maintenance. There's the new initiatives, there's the developments, the kind of extensions of the new policy areas, and that's, I think, what Matt was trying to flag earlier. We've got officers, we've got capacity, we're bringing the strategies forward. There's a question about how we resource them, but quite right, if we can get money from government, great. Inevitably, though, Roger, you're right. That money comes with strings when you do, go for that. If there's other money that could be freed up through things like new housing development, that's kind of also what we're looking for. We're looking at things like community infrastructure levy type investment, because that's an important part of a number of schemes today. So it's just to reassure you that we're alive to that, and hopefully the better these strategies will be in the future, the more resources we'll be able to attract.
Thank you. If we can move on now to just note the contents and.
Yeah, I thought you made some recommendations, I think, during the course in response to myself at one point back.
Did you get those?
Sarah, did you get
them, Sarah?
The
Do you want
recommendation.
to repeat
Yeah.
them, David? Thank you. I should write them down, and I don't, I'm afraid, because I rely on my.
this is Sarah.
Yeah. Okay, if you'd like to repeat them, David.
I think
Sarah, because you've got loads on there.
Yeah, if you've got them to hand, then that's better.
well, I think from memory, I think you said that you wanted to come back. You wanted the wider issues to come back to the committee, because we're straying into not just kind of capital program for maintenance, but wider issues, and that it comes back to the committee. for a further discussion. I think that's what.
I did say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
what you were
After
saying.
cabinet, I think there wasn't it.
Yeah,
after
after cabinet,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So if we,
So
we-
that's
if
it.
agreed with it, yeah,
And everyone's happy with that, yeah? Okay, thank you. Moving on, item 8 is the local transport plan. And obviously we've got Matt with us, who's been dealing with a number of issues already. And we've also got with us, up on the screen somewhere, Victoria Merrill, who's the Highway Policy and Strategy Manager. Hello, hi Victoria. Hi. Okay, so this report, is it, who's reading this report? Is it Matt?
I'll take members through the
Yes,
précis of the
please.
report, and
Thank
then
you
Victoria is
very
the technical expertise. In fact, Victoria,
Thank you.
oh, there we go. In fact, Victoria is actually the officer directly charged with delivering the LTP4's development and ultimately adoption by the council.
Okay.
So, thank you, Chair. Members have cited on the report that I'm just going to pick a few salient key highlights out from. Obviously, happy to take questions at that point. This is very much an update report in terms of progress. There isn't a finished product at this stage in time. The report really outlines the timeline between the last touch with this committee on the 11th of November and the requirement. It does pick up Councillor Evans' point as regards tails and dogs and wagging in terms of DFT's lead on this. It does describe the challenges we've got in getting this over the line without DFT's ultimate guidance, which is going to be delivered, we hope, shortly in a government spring. So we're looking at this process reactivating on receipt of that guidance in short term. It's worth noting the LTP, picking up Councillor Evans' point as regards member involvement, when we get down to the nitty gritty of delivery. I think member involvement, consideration, recommendation and adaptation of the LTP4, that is really going to be that's going to be our ask. That is the ultimate hook we have for levering in national funding initiatives around walking, cycling, active travel, decarbonisation. And I think member agreement and assent to adopting the LTP4 is going to be one of the key ways in which members can influence what we draw down from DFT. So priorities within members' own areas and within members' party line can actually be adopted within the LTP4 by mutual agreement. And that is ultimately how that ask is framed with DFT. We currently have an LTP3, which is to be superseded by LTP4. Worth noting they're materially different documents. And I think this paper talks to the strategic nature of LTP4. If there was a criticism of LTP3, it could have been that it was very parochial. It was driven by outputs rather than outcomes. So discrete schemes were described in there. And failure or success was as regards the to-do list had been furnished. This is very much a strategic document, sits astride the council's ambitions up to 2038, so the local plan timeline. It also talks to agendas much more widely than transport. I think LTP is potentially a misnomer. You're looking about an economic growth agenda, you're talking about a health agenda, you're talking about decarbonisation and environmental impacts. That's very much something that council's got within its own ambitions anyway, and we can vocalise that now in the LTP4. What we need is the final piece of guidance from DFT, which is largely around the decarbonisation tools and the decarbonisation assessments that we're going to be undertaking. Framing transport in decarbonisation terms for a rural county, I think, is an opportunity and also a risk and a challenge. The paper goes into much more detail, written by my colleague Victoria. It's worth noting, though, that when we're talking about decarbonisation, Shropshire sitting strategically in the sub-region of West Midlands, we inherit the disbenefits of long distance travel on many of our arterial routes. So this report describes how the LTP is going to be something we can own and use. Rather than being a victim of cross-border travel, we can actually identify where we can make positive impacts in terms of transport investment around the decarbonisation agenda. So it really is a key tool for the council to frame up its ask, not only with DFT, but equally when we're engaging with bodies around Midlands Connect, the Welsh Government. All of this is going to be our contextual piece, which is our shopping list as we go into future potential competitive funding rounds. We'd hope less competitive and more devolved in terms of the way we deliver funding. But Councillor Evans, that I hope sort of frames up the way members are directly involved in delivering schemes. It's just a walk through the LTP before we get there. I won't labour the report. I'm presuming.
No, hopefully everybody's read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have all read it, haven't you?
Just going to pick up a couple of other key elements which do relate to the recommendations. I think given the strategic nature of this piece of work, the former project steering group, which is effectively officer-led, has now been superseded by direct reference to DMT and the portfolio holder for transport. Such is the significance of this cross-cutting in its themes. It was felt that that was a better governance home for the LTP development, ultimately delivery and ownership. So the decision, the recommendation is that sits within place DMT, which then gives it the critical mass in terms of oversight from colleagues and other directorates as well.
Yeah, I see the recommendations as to consider the update and provide and acknowledge the delay in development of the LTP, which I think we can do. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. LTP 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not sure. This is the third consultation on LTP4, I think, that we will be doing. Previous two have cost money, and I note that there's a reference about it being stopped in March 22. As a member, I was unaware it had stopped because there was a consultation carried out last year and it came to here November 21. I've got the report here, but it seems that we're going to do another LTP. And in previous reports, it says that local authorities must have local transport plans in place. Now, I'm not sure when LTP3 was done, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I'm not sure. But we seem to have spent a long time without a local transport plan. And the DFT or whatever, if we want to bid for money, we need to show it in. And I note there's various references in it, and I could go through the report and pick out a lot. But if we look at page 10, you see that DFT on the importance of LTAs being able to plan for and deliver pipelines of cost-effective schemes and service that reflect key local and national priorities. Northwest Police Program. Does that feature in it? I don't know. If we want money from the Department of Transport, whatever, it's got to be cost-effective schemes and services that totally reflect both local and national. I'm not sure. And it says that in the next paragraph, the previous LTP project board have been realigned, etc. I'm not sure who is now involved with it. It seems to be strange. This is a scrutiny report giving us all the details, but it makes statements similar to that. It doesn't say who is actually involved in drawing it up. If we go to the previous page, page 9, Shropshire's current contract with WSP ends in March 23. I think it's been relet. And the one before that, a preliminary piece of work will be to establish Shropshire's carbon baseline against which the potential impact of any investments can be measured, but there seems to be a lot of things in here. And if we go to page 11, a new commission has been issued to WSP to commence the first stage of work on the further development of the LTP. Is this 5, 6, 7? I'm not sure. I could go on, Chairman, throughout the report. It's a scrutiny. There's not a lot of facts in it. Where are we? I understand we're waiting for guidance from the DFT about what to do, but are we spending money now before that guidance? Is there any timescales? Because later on in the report, it says that the timescale for producing the LTP will be very short. Going to be based on the pillars, but I'm not sure where we're going with it. It's many years out of date. We've got a local plan which is going through the system at present. I'm not sure where it is because there was a recent meeting concerning it, but the LTP must form part of the local plan, or the local plan should incorporate the local transport plan in it. I'm not sure. Wide ranging, Chairman. I apologise for covering it all, but I am concerned about where we are with this local transport plan. It seems many years since we actually did it, and we're doing consultation after consultation and not producing much. Thank you.
Roger, you're here to scrutinise, and that's exactly what you've just done, so thank you. Victoria, do you want to come in at any point? Please do stick your hands up, or do you want to come in now, or shall I go to Matt?
Shall I pick up a couple of points, if
Yeah.
I may refer to Victoria? Just for clarity, this is the local transport plan 4. So we're not 4.1, 4.2. It is 4. And I think that the report does somewhat labour the fact that we are not masters of our own destiny in terms of the timeline. We do require DFT guidance before we can resolve the complete LTP4. So the stop-start nature that you correctly described isn't a process-driven issue with Shropshire Council. We've been naturally, what we've had to do is bide our time until the guidance is there. And I think that talks to an unwillingness to create anything around abortive spend. If we were to make assumptions and proceed following the consultations you describe to an end game which was not cited on DFT's ultimate ambitions, we would be in danger of spending abortive funds on that. Also worth noting that around £178,000 has been released by DFT. These are not funds that the council is funding. DFT is funding the creation of this. So it's cost neutral to the council at the point at which we sit here today. You referred to the WSP contract, which I believe has now been relet. I'm picking my words carefully, but there's a realistic expectation WSP will be able to continue with the creation of this. What it's worth pointing out on that particular partnership is that WSP is also retained by DFT nationally to create the very guidance that we're waiting for. So if there's a synergy for Shropshire Council in that those writing the rules are also writing our LTP, ultimately in very simple terms, I see that as a key opportunity for Shropshire Council to therefore be an exemplar in taking forward to the letter and exceeding the expectations of DFT, because we've got a poacher gamekeeper relationship at that point. And I think it's a key opportunity for us to actually expand the impact of our LTP4 in carbon terms with that key national partner working with us as a local partner as well. I think in terms of the rest of the process, Victoria, if I could just defer to you in terms of where we are with that consultation.
Yeah, at the moment, as the report says, we have issued one commission as part of this sort of next phase of the LTP development, and that has been done on the basis that although we haven't yet got the guidance from the Department for Transport, we have a strong level of confidence on the need for this sort of carbon reduction assessment that needs to be carried out and this carbon baselining work. So that is the piece of work that is ongoing at the moment. That will culminate in a workshop for members and senior officers to work out the sort of scale of the challenge in Shropshire and the pace of change that's needed and start to shape our ambitions in carbon terms. And hopefully that will coincide then with the planned issue of the guidance from the Department of Transport. As Matt said, we are unfortunately being sort of led by the department a little bit at the moment in terms of timescales. We had expected this guidance earlier last year. It's been delayed twice because of all of the changes at central government and certainly with the Secretary of State for Transport. So I haven't heard that there's going to be any further delay, so I would expect that guidance to be with us by the end of March.
Thank you, Victoria. It sounds very much like we're being frustrated by government at the moment, and so we're not actually, it's not in our hands to complete this. I've got Julian, and then I've got David and Roger.
Thank you very much. Yes, no, I absolutely, sympathise with the frustration that you must feel with the delays to that advice, and then earlier last week we had the environmental improvement plan, which also refers to that advice coming forward in terms of air quality, but also there's going to be an air quality strategy at some stage, which would presumably also impact on local transport planning. So yeah, it must be hugely frustrating that the government can't get its act together on all of that stuff. I've got a couple of sort of comments, questions, and it might lead to a recommendation. I'm interested in two aspects, related aspects. One is where you talk about a whole council approach. So that's a lovely buzzword. I'm just wondering what it actually means and what it implies. And that relates to your second point, which is later on you say it will be important to recognise a balance, important to recognise and balance the potential wider value to some interventions. This is about decarbonisation, such as to health, economic growth, and not focus solely on carbon reduction. To me, that's a slightly negative way of putting it, because I think the whole point of having a whole council approach, presumably, is to look at the opportunities. So the opportunities of decarbonisation and modal shift are around social inclusion, are around access to work. You know, we had some really interesting comments in the last few weeks, both at some of these committees, but also at the Midlands Connect event last week, where the Federation of Small Businesses are talking about how young workers cannot get to the jobs, they can't recruit, they can't put people into apprenticeships because they can't get to college and to work. These young workers are never going to bother to drive, it's too expensive for them, it's not the direction they want to go in, they desperately need buses. So we know, you know, we know that the economic story is huge, we know that the social inclusion story is huge. So I'm assuming that's what the whole council approach is going to enable. Where that leads to me is that I think that perhaps as a recommendation, I'm just going to go back up to the recommendations, that co-benefit story really needs to come through, and that I suppose what I'm suggesting is that cabinet actually at some stage has the opportunity to think through and to have, you know, to look at the story from across the different directorates about what are the co-benefits of the decarbonisation story and of the new transport planning, you know, vision-led thing. That's the words that are used there. We're no longer predict and provide. We're now vision-led. So that's I suppose that's my point, is that I think that the co-benefit story really needs to be brought through as large as possible, because that's what should be determining that vision, decarbonising, but also social inclusion and all those other co-benefits that come with it.
Just a question mark, wouldn't cabinet do that? Wouldn't that be part of looking at this overall thing?
It would, Chair, and I think Councillor Dean's kind of striking at the heart of this really. It's important to kind of really, like, this is a transformational change from LTP3. It is a shift away from planning for vehicles into planning for kind of places and people. So that kind of, you know, integration there with the Shropshire plan and what we say to healthy people, that's the top line I think that you're looking for. And for me, there's something really important here about how it sits alongside the local plan as that gets adopted, because there are tools for managing our places. So, you know, I think just to underline, we are frustrated, you know, by the kind of constant re-engagement from government here. But the commitment, as I understand it, is that we've all got to still have plans in place for spring 24. And that hasn't moved yet, has it? So we're on a bit of a platform where that's at least something fixed that we can plan for. But yeah, this is one of those top line kind of policy strategies that will go to full council. So, you know, all members will get to say
so
on
do
this.
you want that as a recommendation on its own? Because as I say, I think
I do have a form of words, but I'm just curious as to what that whole council approach actually looks like. I mean, it comes to Roger's point about who are now managing this process. You know, have you got have you got people who are thinking about social care having a look at this? Have you got people who are thinking about you know, economic development and young people accessing work, inputting on this? So what does that, in other words, what does this whole council approach actually mean in practice?
Okay, Tom.
Done by technology. Okay, it was just, I think that's a really interesting question, and looking at this from just outside the committee, but across all of the committee, what, you know, and not just this strategy, but all strategies, what does the whole council approach look like? Are we able as an organisation to articulate that in a way that is, oh, it's working, is relevant to members, to the public, to officers, anyone who's looking at it? What does that actually look like? And it might be that it needs to be described for different things, but I'm wondering if it might be a recommendation from this committee that actually being able to articulate what the whole council approach is something that is considered across the piece, not just in this instance. Because I just think it's a really good question, but I think it's we are using it more and more as a council, as we say it. So what do we mean, and can everybody get behind it?
Would you be happy with that as a recommendation?
Yes, and then the second one is to specifically, you know, encourage cabinet to ask about the co-benefits, to use that terminology when we're talking about transport, so that we're actually using that when we're thinking about LTP.
Can I just ask if Sarah's captured that recommendation? Yeah, you have. Thank you very much. Okay, good one. Julian? Oh, sorry, I'm looking at David. So Julian. You look so similar.
I don't know about that. Anyway, thank you, Chair. I just want to picking up the points that have just been made actually about the importance of LTP4 and how it's a very different approach to LTP3. And picking up a section in the report which says that development of the LTP was put on hold in March 22, pending issue of the new DFT guidance. Now, I was quite surprised by that because I wasn't aware of it. And I would have thought that given the changes that LTP4 requires in terms of approach, in terms of the scale of it, surely we should have continued those particular sort of analyses and examinations of how we're going to go forward, even though we didn't have the actual LTP4 guidance, the detailed guidance from government. And indeed, if you look at a question answer to a question which Rob Wilson put to Cabinet in June 2022, it makes no mention of this LTP4 work being put on hold. And it appears, for example, that gap analysis is going to be done, various things are being completed. So there's a mismatch here between what's said in the report and this report answer which is given in Cabinet about LTP4. And I'm worried that in actual fact, and this comes from another theme I've been developing at this committee meeting, is communication. We as councillors, opposition councillors, and as councillors looking at the operation of the council, we need to be properly informed of what's going on. And I felt, particularly with the previous discussion we had about highways maintenance contracts and things, we don't get that. And similarly, one of the themes that came out of the Townsend Finish group was the fact that we needed more communication. And I think here, it seems to me that and certainly in the different departments, that one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. That you were saying that it was being stopped in March, and in June you were saying that work was continuing. I think that we need more coordination, more information.
Mark, how do we do that? Yeah.
Well, I think firstly it's important to point out that actually Matt is reporting to Tracy Dar.
Yes.
And that kind of integration across, all things to do with the planning of place is kind of being singularly managed. So I think that's a really important piece, because what we're driving at here is this holistic? Is it involving kind of wider parts of the council? The difficulty with the specifics is there's been lots, I think, and Victoria and Matt can come in, but there's still been lots of evidence gathering and engagement trying to identify needs locally. But of course, how that then fits in the framework of a plan is kind of what's been paused. So we've kind of tried to keep the balance of some momentum without kind of, and it does happen occasionally. The government will fundamentally change the guidance and suddenly go off down a different road. So that bit about using our resources carefully we've been mindful of. The wider holistic bit, I play back, we've now got the Shropshire plan locally that outlines healthy people as one of our top line priorities. So that's something really important, I think, for Councillor Massima to kind of be reassured about, that that's now driving all sorts of kind of cross-cutting engagements across the council. So I think the team are well placed to do that. I think we're kind of structured better to do that than we were before. We just need this final bit of guidance and we can get on with it and get it done. But I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add.
I was going to defer to Victoria just on that timeline around activity, because there were pieces of work, as Mark described, that it was worth completing, but there were certain initiatives that we did pause on realistically because the goalposts were shifting and continue to do so. Is it worth just clarifying where we are on that stop-start, Victoria?
Yeah, so I think the report that you're referring to from last year was really just a sort of summary of the work that we've done to date. And really, like Mark said, it's been a balancing act about using what resources we've got available, and trying to minimise any abortive work going forward. So yes, we have done a substantial piece of work on evidence gathering. We'd also done some initial consultation with a wide range of stakeholders, sort of understanding some of the key issues across the county, and that is inevitably going to be a need to look at updating that slightly and make sure it's as relevant and as live as it can be. And that in itself presents a bit of an opportunity for us as well. When we first started work on this, we didn't have the new Shropshire plan. And as it stands, we're now ideally placed to hook into those sort of, healthy initiatives, the healthy people, healthy environment, etc. So yes, that's where we are, and I'm reasonably confident that that work that we'd done originally will sort of streamline into this with a few tweaks. It's not completely abortive, and just to touch on some of the comments that were made earlier about that whole council approach in this context, when the work was sort of ongoing before we paused it, that was really about our steering group that we had, that had officers sat on it from public health, colleagues in public protection, various different parts of the authority, to try and bring in their intelligence on shaping where we were going, and not have that sort of siloed transport approach that might have been used in the past.
Okay. Thank you. David, does that answer your question about communications? And if it doesn't, what's something that you're looking for?
Well, I think that we should have been told if there was a pause on some of the work that was being done on LTP4 in March 2022. I think we should have been told, and certainly Councillor Wilson, when he asked this question at Cabinet, should have been told. And I just think there needs to be more communication about what is happening as far as LTP4 is concerned with members generally across the board, because I think a lot of us, some of us, are very interested in the progress of this, and I just don't feel that we've been given the information about what's happening. And I think that a recommendation from here is that we need to be consulted more often about this and given details about what's going on.
Okay, so you're proposing that recommendation? Yes. That we are kept up to date on the LTP. Sarah's got that, she's nodding away there. Okay. I've got Roger. Right?
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to pick up the comment that Councillor Vasmir just brought up about the seeming difference between what this report says and the answer to a question at the Cabinet. I'll leave that with you to progress, because I think that does need to be communication, whatever, and information. But the other part was that on page 13 of this report, there is under progress in Shropshire, but at the top of that page, as a preliminary activity, WSP has undertaken a review. Hope we're not paying them twice for the same work, but there is a table there, and it says there desirable, essential, to be, essential, to be. Is there any timeline for that? Because as said earlier on, when and if this guidance from government comes out, there may be quite short timescales in order to respond. So is that work in progress? It doesn't say that it is.
Well, it does say table 1. It said LTP gap analysis on potential new guidance.
Yeah, and also through you, Chairman, it also says that following completion of the carbon under next steps, following completion of the Carbon Baseline Commission, the key next steps will be to there. And I'm concerned, are we doing anything or not? Because it's to be essential to update in 2 of those in that table. So we need to do some preparation, I would have thought, in anticipation of what comes out. So, but it doesn't give any indication that action is being taken.
Victoria, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, we really need to do the carbon baselining piece of work first. When the initial work was done on starting to develop the next LTP for Shropshire, we didn't have that strong carbon reduction theme that we've got now. We know that that's going to be a fundamental part of the new Department for Transport guidance. So we need to do that, and then we need to weave that into the work that we've already done. And that will then inform where we're going next in terms of next stages. That carbon baselining work is due to be complete by the end of March. So at that point, we will be in a very strong position to have a much more focused timeline on the key stages going forward. But like Mark said, at the moment, we've still got that deadline of spring 24 that the DfT haven't moved on yet. There's been some suggestion that they may change that, but I don't know. That's just speculation in the industry at the moment.
I'm feeling the frustration from officers and members alike with DfT. Thank you, Victoria. Anything else? No? Right, okay, so I think we followed those recommendations and acknowledge the revised governance arrangements that have been put into place. I'd like to thank officers. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Matt. And we will now, I don't think we need to vote on that one, do we? No, there's no, oh, we've got 2 recommendations, what am I saying? We have 2 recommendations, don't we? Can you just read them out for us, Sarah? No rush.
I haven't put them into formal words
No,
yet.
it's fine. No rush.
So to add something around decarbonisation and the co-benefits, and also a whole benefit approach, what it means to the council, and also more communication to members and to them to be kept up to date on LTP.
That's right. I'm sorry, I should have gone to Tom really, because Tom's written it down. Do you want to just read it, Tom?
Yeah, I
Make
think
sure it's right.
again, it probably needs tweaking, but I think the gist of the recommendation is about that the council articulates what it means by a whole council approach. It needs to be, but it's just being able to describe it, because I think part of the conversation was members need to be able to understand it, officers need to understand it, and the public, when anyone's hearing it, needs to be able to understand what that's mean. It's a bit like being able to describe the outcome or the impact. What does it really want that to look like, for it to feel like for people? So
That's good. That's good. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, Sarah. Can we vote on those recommendations? Is everybody happy with them? We're a great committee. We all agree on everything, don't we? Thank you. That's a nice way for your last meeting here, isn't it? Everyone agreeing with everything. So we'll move on to item 9. If officers want to leave, I know how busy you are. Please do, or you can stay.
Thank you, Chair.
Place over the committee work programme. This is for you, Daniel.
Chair, just a few items for your next meeting in March. As agreed, Tom will be picking these up for you. The LED lighting programme will finally be coming to the committee as requested. The planning service will be bringing various watching on various reports that have come in recent years, one on planning enforcement and one on various recommendations that came about unexpectedly from your review of planning committee structure, particularly around training. Other recommendations which obviously will come through from your work around housing development to take some time to bed in, so perhaps suggest you leave those for some point in the future. And then finally, an update on the review of the winter service plan, which you asked for as well. So that marks the end of your work programme for this municipal year then, so you will have to meet at some point in the next month or so to agree on priorities for your work programme going forward for your municipal year from May onwards.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. Everybody happy with the work programme? Yeah. Okay, before we move to the date and time of the next meeting, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Daniel. I'm quite an emotional person, so give me a tissue to stop crying. You've been an exceptional scrutiny officer, a huge support, and you've been very much missed. Books, I will go to that. Date and time of the next meeting is the 23rd of March at 2 p.m. Steve Davenport will actually be taking that meeting, as I'm not here sadly, and we couldn't change the date. I tried very hard, but officers wouldn't have been available, etc. So my apologies for that. And also Paul Wynne won't be here, and Roy Aldridge, wonderful, has said he will fill in. Have you forgotten?
No, I thought my surname was
Yes.
Old Crofts.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank
Just
you.
last slide for the live stream to end.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.